So, a huge trade deal just got signed between the US and India. And on the surface, it looks like it's all about economics, right? Tariffs, numbers. But trust me, that's not the real story here. What we're really talking about is geopolitics, psychology, and one man's incredibly powerful ego. To really get what just happened, we've got to dig a lot deeper. And that brings us to the central question India has been wrestling with for years when it comes to Donald Trump. Is he a friend or a foe? I mean, one minute you've got these warm handshakes and all this praise, and the next, bam, he's threatening tariffs that could just crush them. The only thing that's been consistent, really, is the total unpredictability. So here's the bottom line, the thing you've absolutely got to understand to make sense of any of this. The key to this whole trade saga, it's not buried in some dusty economic report. Nope, it's all inside the mind of Donald Trump. If you want to get his policies, you first have to get his psychology. Okay, let's dive into our first section, the Trump paradox. Because this deal, it seems like it solves a huge problem, right? But the real reasons it happened are way more complicated and honestly a lot more personal than you'd probably guess. I mean, just look at the numbers here for a second. This is a massive swing. India was staring down the barrel of these punitive tariffs as high as 50%. And now, with this new deal, they're slashed all the way down to 18%. That's a huge deal, and it pulled both countries back from what was looking like a pretty nasty trade war. But even though it seems like great news, you have to ask, who really won here? And that really gets to the heart of it, doesn't it? Is this deal a real, stable, long-term solution that's good for everyone, or is it just a pause, a temporary ceasefire that really just depends on the mood of one guy? Just a brief timeout in a much, much bigger and crazier game. All right, section 2. And this is where we get to the core of it all. It's all about ego. Look, to really get what's going on, you have to talk about ego. Forget the policy papers for a minute. His actions are driven by this deep personal need to win, and maybe even more importantly, to never be seen as weak or disrespected. Ever. And if you want an origin story, this is it. We have to go back to 2011. Donald Trump, just a businessman at the time, gets absolutely roasted by President Obama at the White House Correspondents' Dinner. I mean, he was mocked in front of everybody, the whole political and media world. A lot of people point to that moment, that public humiliation, as the spark that lit his political fire. It was never really about policy. It was about revenge. It was about proving every single person in that room wrong. And this quote, well, it just sums it all up perfectly, doesn't it? The pattern is so clear. You challenge him, you slight him, even in the tiniest way, and he takes it personally. And then he will go to any lengths to win. Think about it. He arguably ran for president just to settle a score. That's the kind of mindset we're talking about here. Okay, so how does this very personal psychology actually turn into international trade policy, specifically with a country like India? Well, as it turns out, there's a pretty consistent, almost predictable three-step pattern. Let me show you exactly how this played out. So first, the challenge. Trump offers to mediate the whole India-Pakistan conflict. He probably saw a chance for a huge, historic win, a Nobel Prize moment. But then India politely says, "No thanks, this is something we handle ourselves." Now, Trump didn't hear a careful diplomatic response. He heard a personal no. He saw it as a rejection, a slight to his ego. And the punishment? It came fast, and it came in the form of trade tariffs. Now check this out. This is a look at the initial proposed tariffs back in April. You can see India was at 26%, which, yeah, that's high, but it's actually lower than what was being proposed for places like China and Vietnam. This was the starting point, the baseline, before things got personal. But after India said no, this happened. 50%. The tariffs on India skyrocketed to a staggering 50%. And this wasn't just one tax. It was a 25% reciprocal tariff, a tit-for-tat thing, plus another 25% on top just for punishment. This stopped being about economics. This was personal. This was a message. It was payback. But then, India made a really clever countermove. They went and signed this massive free trade agreement with the European Union. The media was calling it the mother of all deals. All of a sudden, Europe was getting this amazing access to India's giant market, and America was left on the sidelines. Now, for a guy driven by ego, can you imagine seeing someone else get the deal of the century? That's just not going to fly. And that right there created a huge motivation for him to get his own deal with India. And he needed it fast.
Okay, so we've talked about the personal side of things, but there's also a much bigger, more calculated strategy going on here. We're calling it the Thanos Grand Plan. Yeah, like the guy from the movies. It's a plan to completely rebalance the global economy, even if it causes a little or a lot of chaos. It might be painful, sure, but from this point of view, it's what you have to do to stay on top.
So, in the world of economics, this idea has a name. It's called a relative gain strategy. And it's actually pretty simple. The goal isn't just about making your own country richer. The goal is to make sure you're getting richer faster than your rivals. It's all about widening the gap between number one and everyone else. And hey, if you have to slow down the entire global economy to do that, well, so be it, as long as you're still the one on top at the end of the day. And here's a great way to think about it. Picture the whole world economy as this huge forest full of giant trees. Now, a recession is like someone coming in and chopping a few feet off the top of every single tree. So sure, the American tree gets shorter too. But here's the key. Because it was already the tallest tree in the forest, when all the dust settles, it's still the tallest one standing, now looming over a forest of much smaller competitors. So, if you're India, how in the world do you navigate this? You're dealing with someone who's unpredictable, driven by ego, and using a ruthless global strategy. It's pretty clear the old playbook, well, you can probably just throw it out the window.
When it comes to geopolitics, you've basically got two ways to play the game. There's idealpolitik, which is all about playing by the rules, focusing on what's morally right, and then you've got realpolitik. This one is all about pragmatism. It's about your country's interests and power, period. You're not asking what's the right thing to do, you're asking what works for us. And in the world we live in now, you kind of have to understand realpolitik. It's not just a strategy anymore, it's about survival. In a world like this, everything comes down to one word: leverage. What do you have that the other side wants? For India, that means identifying its unique strengths. We're talking its huge market, its incredible pool of talent, its strategic spot on the map, and using them without hesitation to protect its own interests. You can't just sit around and hope everyone plays fair anymore. You have to make your own advantages. And just when you think things might be calming down, don't get too comfortable. The danger is far from over. Yeah, this trade deal is a relief, but there's another storm brewing in the U.S. Congress. It's called the Sanctioning Russia Act of 2025. And if this thing passes, it could slap massive tariffs on any country that trades with Russia. For India, with its deep economic and defense relationship with Moscow, that is a huge, huge problem. And when I say massive tariffs, I'm not exaggerating. The penalty being thrown around in this bill is 500%. Let that sink in. 500%. That 50% threat that caused this entire crisis, it would look like a tiny little rounding error next to this. And this threat, it is still very much real, and it just goes to show you how delicate this whole situation really is. All of this kind of leaves us with this final, pretty chilling quote from Henry Kissinger. In this new world of transactional, ego-driven geopolitics, figuring out who your allies are has become more complicated, and frankly, more dangerous than ever before. The line between friend and foe seems to be blurring every single day, and maybe the only thing that's certain anymore is that every country is just looking out for itself.